everybody's been talking over the last 20, 30, 40 years about UX design. I actually think very soon we're going to see a lot of people start talking about AIX design, designing for the AI's experience.
That's an incredible insight, and I think you're absolutely right, because especially if AI assistants become a thing, which it clearly looks like it is going to be a thing, right? Like, why would you create software for humans, right, if they're not going to use it? If the mantra of in general startup land is make something for the user is no longer the human, right? The user is the AI at the end of the day. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Off-Topic interview series. Today I am super excited to have Flo on. Flo from Lindy. He is I've heard Flo talk a bunch of times on different podcasts, and I knew I had to get him on. Flo, welcome to Off Topic, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Tetsuro.
Yeah, let's get right into it, because everybody's talking about AI right now, and you're building a really, really cool AI product. Talk a little bit about yourself and what Lindy does.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of Lindy, which is an AI assistant that helps you do your tasks. So it's got access to all of your applications and your data, and it uses that to do work for you. So the first three categories of things that Lindy does very well are email, calendar, and meeting recording. So it can draft your emails for you, it can schedule your meetings for you, and it can join your meetings and sit alongside you on your meetings and take notes for you, summarize the meetings, extract the action items, send follow-ups, and so on and so forth.
And do you kind of instruct the AI to do this, or is some of this kind of default on from the beginning? How does that work?
Yeah, so mostly the user is in charge. So it's basically like an AI assistant that you can ask them to do anything. But yes, when you on board, Lindy asks you like, hey, welcome to Lindy. I'm Lindy. I'm your new assistant. Here are some things I can do for you. Would you like me to join your meetings moving forward and record them and so on?
Yeah, so I think this concept of AIs doing actual tasks, and especially cross-application, is I think very, very cool, right? I think that we've seen a lot of like very simple tasks being done through AI, but talk a little bit about how it's possible for Lindy to go cross-app and also understand each app. Like what kind of training data do you feed it?
Yeah, so the way Lindy interacts with the world is through APIs. And so the way this all started is that when we started looking into AI as a team, it was in the era of like generative AI, right? Like it generates images, it generates language. And we were like, generative AI is super cool, but the GDP is not made of copywriters and illustrators. The GDP is made of work, right? And so I actually think that we're transitioning away from the era of generative AI towards agentic AI. And so we were like, okay, how can we leverage GPT-3 at the time and now GPT-4 in order to do work for people? And so we came up with this idea of, can we get GPT-3 or GPT-4 to write API calls for us? Because you can basically do a lot of work with APIs.
Right.
And we experimented with that a little bit, and very quickly we realized that it worked really, really well. And so the way it works is that really we give to Lindy a ton of APIs, and then we give it a goal. So we're like, hey, this is the Gmail API, this is the Google Calendar API. Now, can you use these APIs to help me find time for a 30 minutes meeting with Tetsuro next week? And so the AI is going to be smart enough to hit up the Google Calendar API at first, pull my availabilities next week, find a few 30 minutes slots, and then compose an email and send it to you by email using the Gmail API. And then, we do a lot of training on top of that. We have our own proprietary data set, but that's the high level idea here.
Right. And I think I actually scheduled a meeting with you through Lindy, right? So I was not able to tell if you were emailing me or if it was Lindy, like how, like what, yeah, like talk a little bit about, I think one of the really cool things that you had described in a different podcast about Lindy was this idea of how much Lindy completes the task. Like, does it actually finish and send the email, or does it choose not to based off of how important the task is and how well it's completed?
Yeah, so that's something we take super carefully. We have 7 founding principles for Lindy, and one of them is Lindy doesn't screw up. Right, she gets everything right, because the point of an assistant is to make your life easier. If she starts screwing up, it's not making your life any easier. And so, in order to achieve that, every time Lindy is about to perform an action, she takes into account 2 big criteria. How certain is she about the action that she's about to perform? And assuming that she gets it wrong, how high are the stakes? Right? And so she takes into account these 2 criteria, and she uses those to make a decision to do one of 3 things. If she's very certain and it's high stakes, she's just going to go ahead and do it without your approval. Or she can decide to do it but let you undo it. Right? So for example, she's like, hey, I sent this email, but actually she doesn't send it immediately. She leaves you 5 or 10 minutes, and you can be like, no, don't send the email, and she won't send the email, right? Or the third and maximum level of security is she doesn't do anything until you say so, until you've confirmed that this is something that you want Lindy to do. So this is something that we're still iterating on, but we take that super seriously. It's just making sure that the reliability of the tool is top notch.
I actually really like that middle ground that you mentioned, because I think the first and the last cases, I think they're pretty common, but like the middle case where you can just kind of like quickly read it, scan it, and see like, okay, like this is fine, like I'll just let it go, right, and I'll just let Lindy handle the task, like that I think is really cool. So yeah, so these 7 founding principles that you have, I think are pretty crucial. And then can you talk through the email use case of Lindy? Was really, really cool, because I think you had mentioned it prioritizes the email for you, every morning when you wake up. Plus it pre-drafts the reply, but it's not just that, right? It's like it goes far more specifically into how it pre-drafts replies.
Yeah, so that's right. Like the way you use Lindy is that you wake up every morning and you open your inbox, and you wake up to an inbox with a bunch of emails pre-drafted for you, ready to review and to send. Lindy takes care of 2 dimensions when she writes your emails. She takes care of the voice and the content, and she tailors the voice to your recipient. So when you use Lindy for the first time, she actually ingests your email and learns from your voice for each recipient. So supposedly and hopefully, you don't speak to your employees the same way you speak to your wife or to your investors. And so Lindy is going to detect that and learn from your voice for each of these recipients, and then she's going to draft the email learning from your voice for each of these recipients. And then there's also the content side of things. So that is something that we're still working on, and it's still very much in beta. But over the long term, the idea is that if someone sends you a question about a factual fact about your company, Lindy will be smart enough to be able to pull that content from your data, from your wiki or anything like that, and will be able to take that into account when she drafts a reply.
That is really cool. And I think like this is especially important in Japan, because in Japan, even within business, depending on who you talk to and how how senior that person is or how junior that person is, your email, like how you write your email and how you communicate, changes completely. So again, like that is, I think, super interesting. And then I think, yeah, the cross app part, I think it really feels like an executive assistant that you have with you, but you're not sharing, your passwords with them. You're not kind of giving them kind of full control of everything, but like they're taking into this same account, right? Like how high is the stakes? Do I have to confirm with my boss, right? Like I think that like how, when you were building Lindy, were you kind of taking essentially examples from executive assistants and how they think and incorporating that, or is that kind of just how you built it ground up?
No, we built it from the ground up. So we didn't have to give it examples like that. We literally just, under the hood, it is a large language model, and we tell the large language model, you are an AI assistant. And just from that, that goes a very, very long way.
Awesome. And then can you talk about some of the other kind of examples that you see pretty often with Lindy, other than kind of emails, and then hopefully some with multiple applications kind of tied together?
Yeah, so I think the one I just talked about is really the canonical example of Lindy tying a bunch of applications together. It's like, you can CC Lindy to an email. It's like, suppose you reach out to me and you're like, Flo, let's talk next week. And I can CC Lindy to that email, and Lindy is going to chain together the Gmail API and the Google Calendar API. Another example that we're pretty excited about, I should caveat everything I'm saying is in beta, obviously. But Lindy can join your meetings, and afterwards she can connect to your CRM, so your Salesforce, your HubSpot or whatnot, and she can update your CRM for you based on what was said during the meeting. So you can be like, Lindy, join my client calls, and after the meeting, update my CRM with next steps or desired purchase volume or stuff like that, right? So that is also a pretty popular use case. Sending follow-up to the emails as well with the summary is a pretty popular one. I think right now those are some of the biggest ones.
That makes sense. And yeah, having Lindy join kind of meetings and potentially take notes, like I think updating CRMs is always really, really annoying, and kind of being able to do that all automatically is awesome. Do you essentially just instruct Lindy via text prompts, or can you kind of show Lindy this is how you do things, and then have Lindy quote unquote copy you? What's kind of the steps there?
Today it's only via text prompts. Eventually, not quite yet, but over the long term, definitely you will be able to instruct Lindy, and like it's kind of like a do one, show one, train one, do, like just record your screen and click around, and Lindy will be able to do the same thing as you. But right now it's only text.
Right. And then talk about kind of building out workflows with Lindy, because I think you had mentioned that you can, if you give Lindy a certain task, you can specify in terms of, okay, like make sure to do this before you start the entire workflow, or yeah.
Yeah, so Lindy supports two things. She supports arbitrary preferences, and she supports recurring workflows. So an arbitrary preference is, I can say, for example, hey, Lindy, no meetings on Friday mornings. Friday mornings is like my thinking time, right? Or when you book a restaurant meeting, try to make it within a 1 mile radius of my place. Or try to book only vegetarian food, for example, or things like that. So those are preferences. And you can give preferences to Lindy of arbitrary complexity. Then there is the recurring workflow, which is something that keeps happening. So for example, my favorite recurring workflow with Lindy is, hey Lindy, every morning, please send me a digest of my meetings for the day, and send me for each meeting the meeting link, the LinkedIns of the people I'm meeting with, and the content of the meeting by summarizing my previous emails with the person and my previous meetings with the person. So for example, in your case, I'm looking at the daily digest right now. Lindy is like, oh, you were in touch with Tetsuro to record the podcast.
Right.
And so that's just awesome. Like every morning I wake up and I receive that email, and I know exactly what's waiting for me for the day.
Well, that sounds almost like an even more powerful executive assistant than like what most human executive assistants won't even do that, because you have to go through all the previous emails and see what was the entire context behind it, and then be able to summarize that, right? So that's really, really hard.
I agree. I think it is better than a human in very many ways. Like, for example, the team is telling me like, oh, right now Lindy is a bit too slow, right? It's taking 30 seconds to reply on average. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 30 seconds? This is the best executive assistant ever. And it's available 24/7. And also, I don't feel shy about asking it terrible things, right?
That's actually really important, yeah.
Yeah, you could ask it. I can ask Lindy, hey, 2 minutes before every meeting, send me a text with the meeting link. I would never ask that to my human executive assistant. That's like such a terrible thing to ask them. So yes, I actually think people underestimate the extent to which you reach superhuman performance right out the box.
So I think this shows two things, right? I think one is for some reason, whenever it becomes an AI, we have a different expectation for it, that it needs to be like perfect. It needs to be like immediate, right? So like the 30-second kind of delay is, I think, it shows that. And then the second part is that because it's an AI, like you can have it do quote unquote unreasonable tasks for that humans would find unreasonable, but not an AI. So I think it shows both those dynamics at once.
100%.
Yeah, and then talk a little bit about kind of privacy, because I think that's an important part about Lindy. what's kind of your policy around that? And then in terms of like cloud versus local, like any thoughts around there?
Yeah, so we take privacy super, super seriously. And it is something that it is one of the first core principles of Lindy. At the end of the day, our goal is to build the world's best AI assistant. Mm-hmm. And right now, there is no way to do that in a way that is local, unfortunately. Mm. Right? That does mean that these AI models are way too big. It's going to be 50 gigabytes. It requires a very, very powerful machine.
Right.
We think it is possible to have our cake and eat it too. We think it is possible to protect your privacy without turning your phone into a data center. We see people who are like, I'm gonna host the model locally on your phone. I'm like, that's great, but that's really only gonna work on like the very latest generations of iPhone. It's gonna work on no Android phone. It's only gonna work on iPhone and only on the iPhone 14, right? And even then, you're gonna take 40 gigabytes of the storage of that phone. So we don't really believe in turning people's phones into data centers. We also do want to protect their privacy. We take that super, super seriously. And I can tell you, we never compromise on that inside the company. Multiple times a day, I'm in meetings and people are like, we could do it this way, right? It would be so much easier, and you would sacrifice a little bit of privacy. And every time we're like, no, we don't do that. Like, we never sacrifice an inch of privacy. So again, we think it's possible to have our cake and eat it too, and that's what we're working on right now.
Awesome. And then in terms of kind of you mentioned API integrations. Is that something that the company Lindy essentially has to integrate with a bunch of API providers, or eventually is it going to be each kind of Lindy assistant being able to go to different applications that the user uses, be able to ingest the API documentation from there, and then start using those APIs?
Yeah, so that is already the way it works, actually. We are today using AI to build these integrations for us. So building a new integration actually is super easy. It takes us a day, basically, to add a new integration to Lindy. We have to do a little bit of messaging on top of the integration that the API is building for us. But no, right now we can just use AI to build the integrations for us.
Wow, that's incredible. I think that's just another thing, right? It's like using AI to build all these applications has just become a lot quicker and a lot cheaper. And I think you had mentioned this in a podcast episode where you mentioned the cost of the AI has of building apps, right, has dramatically lowered, right, from previously to like tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars to now like $1, even less than $1, right? And I think one of the really, really impactful things you had said was that now we're going to have single-use apps, right? And I think Lindy does this very, very well. There's a lot of, whenever you ask the AI to perform a task, it essentially creates a single-use app. Sometimes it's recurring, sometimes it's not, right? Can you talk a little bit about kind of the concept of single-use apps? And then, what kind of use cases do you kind of see, in Lindy and also broadly within this space? Because I think this is a very, very different concept from what we are very used to of having long-term, user retention heavy apps.
Yeah. I know it sounds crazy, this idea of single-use application, but it's happened before. I always use this example of the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, goods were very expensive. A glass was probably $500, right? Or a pen was very expensive. And now you have single-use solo caps, right? These plastic caps, single-use, and like disposable big pens, right? Unthinkable. Or I also talk about there was this Napoleon dinner where at some point he was having a dinner with kings, and like the princes had silver cutlery and the kings had gold cutlery, and Napoleon had aluminum cutlery. It was insanely precious, and now aluminum is so cheap that we have this single-use goods. I'm actually drinking from an aluminum can, and then I throw it away. Right. It's just like if I throw away gold. It's actually the same thing as throwing away gold after every drink, right? Yep. So I think it's the same thing for applications, where today an app costs $10,000, $100,000. It is very rapidly switching to a world where apps cost 1 cent or 10 cents. And so that is exactly what Lindy does for you. Behind the scenes, when you ask Lindy to do something for you, she actually writes a mini application. She writes a piece of code. and she uses that to do what you're asking her to do. One of the really nice things about doing the code is that when you write code, you can also write given user interfaces. So for example, I can ask Lindy, hey Lindy, can you summarize different Slack channels for me, like what was said in Slack yesterday? And Lindy could start by saying, and by the way, this is an actual example of something that she does today. She could start by saying, oh, what Slack channels do you want me to summarize for you? And she's going to offer you a pick list that you can click and select and click on multiple Slack channels, right? Because Lindy can basically build that in a one-off way.
Right.
What I'm super excited about in this world of, it's basically end user programming, right? Is we have this saying in French that you are never better served than by yourself. Right now we have that effectively that clergy class of software engineers that write apps for us, and we can't have direct access to software. I think it is a much better world in which end users are building their own applications, right? It's like cooking for yourself.
Right.
And I think that when end users are creating their own tools, they're basically going to build experiences that are infinitely more personalized to their own needs. And I'm just very excited to see what that looks like, and I think we're going to see it very soon.
Yeah, and I think like each individual has their own specific workflow that they do, right? Like whenever I create a podcast, first like I always want to like mess around with the audio a little bit, make sure there's no background noise. But like all of that like I have to do manually, and it's really annoying, right? It's like essentially maybe it's just even setting up until that part I asked Lindy to like do for me, right? And it becomes a lot easier. And so I think you're absolutely right. There's going to be so many personalized workflows and applications built individually. How do you think that affects kind of general kind of SaaS applications? I think there's two perspectives of this. One is the single use apps. So I think more software providers are gonna offer kind of customizability, right, through single use kind of applications within their SaaS apps. And then I think the other thing you had mentioned was the OS layer, kind of the operating system layer, has kind of changed with AI. Previously it was hardware at the bottom, operating system applications, but now like this AI assistant kind of layer goes on top, and it's almost like another operating system. Should SaaS providers be kind of scared about that? Because it almost feels like Lindy could say like, oh, like maybe you should use this application instead of this application. It might be better because Lindy's an expert in each of the applications that it ingests.
Yeah. Yes, I think SaaS players should be worried about that. I think over 20 or 40 years, I don't think humans will work anymore. And so to the extent that applications are here to help you work, why would we need applications anymore? I think AI will do the work. So to the extent we need applications, I think we will be building and designing these applications for the AI to use, not for humans to use.
Oh, interesting.
And that's actually something that we are starting to do ourselves right now. Like we are more and more, the way we build these integrations, again, and AI is building these integrations for us in the first place, but then we have to tweak the integration a little bit to fit the way the AI wants to use it. So we're not tweaking the API for humans to use it, we're tweaking it for an AI to use it. And so I actually think everybody's been talking over the last 20, 30, 40 years about UX design. I actually think very soon we're going to see a lot of people start talking about AIX designing for the AI's experience.
That's an incredible insight, and I think you're absolutely right, because like especially if AI assistants become a thing, which it clearly looks like it is going to be a thing, right? Like, why would you create software for humans, right, if they're not going to use it? If the mantra of in general startup land is make something for the user is no longer the human, right? The user is the AI at the end of the day, and so that's really insightful. And so yeah, the AIX design, I think that's. Did you coin that, by the way? I think you might have to copyright it.
I think it's not me. It's like someone from the team who was like, we're doing like AIX design, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone else came up with it. I totally agree. And again, like I think people don't want to use software. People want to do their work.
Right.
And I think, again, like at first, we're going to have that transitionary period where they're going to do their work through AI.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a hybrid world where they both use AI and the tools directly. But little by little, we're going to see the AI do more and more of the work.
Yeah, and it's, I think you can almost say that there might be even more SaaS applications in the future because of this, because I think one of the biggest barriers to new SaaS applications was the onboarding process, right? Like it always sucked as a user to kind of learn new systems, to have to learn new workflows and all of that, right? And you just want to get your work done. You just want to get some task completed, and having to learn a new system from scratch has always been a big barrier. And then the second thing is you're not an expert in it because you don't know all the little functionalities, you don't know all the hacks, right? But an AI can figure all that out for you.
100%.
Awesome. Is there any other part about Lindy that you want to mention? I think it's in beta right now. As of our recording, which is in April. Yeah. Anything before we kind of go into more kind of general AI? Yeah.
No, I think we covered it. I think we covered a lot of good ground here.
Yeah, so definitely it's Lindy.ai, and definitely sign up for the beta program. Is in terms of like Japanese, how compatible is it to Japanese right now?
Frankly, we haven't tested it in Japanese. I wouldn't be surprised if it worked just by default. Like
right.
we've done no work for it. I wouldn't expect it to do a great job in Japanese.
Right.
We do like and I would rate us like an A- in English. I wouldn't be surprised if we did like a C Japanese or something like that. But eventually we do intend to support a lot more languages.
Got it. Maybe I can be a good first test user because I can do it in both. But okay, let's talk a little bit about AI safety and then AGI. You had tweeted this pretty recently that I thought was kind of scary but also fascinating about how Lindy using skills in ways that you did not kind of foresee or even acquiring new skills. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw, and then is this a little bit of concern for you? Is this a good thing? Yeah.
I think it's a great thing all in all. It's the way it's working is that, again, Lindy writes code and she has access to a lot of libraries, and
right.
sometimes we see her use these libraries in a way that's like, holy cow, like I didn't know. Okay, I didn't think about that, I guess. Like one example is summarizing web pages. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, like summarize this URL for us, and it just went and used a library to pull the web page and then extract the readable text from it and then summarize it. So that was
you
impressive.
Gave it no like specific instruction, or you like previously never taught it to actually. Like you didn't taught what to do with the URL, like how to read a website or anything.
Yeah, we gave it very basic building blocks, but that one took us by surprise.
Wow.
So to answer your question, I am generally worried about AI safety. I think it's important that everyone be worried about AI safety. I worry about it. We spend time thinking about it and actually building guardrails around it. Mm-hmm. And as we train Lindy, we are constantly reinforcing the 7 constitutional principles that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and then there's 2 main risks with AI, right? One is the misuse risk, right? And then one is the more kind of AGI kind of type of risk. And then, how, there's a lot of talk about like AI alignment, and I think constitutional AIs, right? Anthropic did this, and I think Lindy's kind of 7 principles is something similar as well. Do you think having those kind of principles is a really good way to prevent both misuse and kind of the AGI risks? Or can you talk a little bit about that?
I do believe that this constitutional approach is important. I think it is a big piece of the equation. I also believe that RLHF is going to be another big piece of the equation. Mm-hmm. I don't think that either of those gets us to where we need to be, and it isn't clear what we need to do in order to really deploy a safe AGI.
Interesting.
I agree that there is the sort of like misuse risk, and then there's the AGI or ASI risk. Mm-hmm. So for the audience's context, this idea of AGI and ASI. And AGI is an AI that is just as good as a human at doing everything that humans do.
Right.
Now, since building that AGI is one of the things that humans do, that means that the AGI is better at improving itself than a human would be. And so the idea of AGI, of ASI, that stands for Artificial Superintelligence, as opposed to AGI, which is Artificial General Intelligence, is that you end up having a recursive self-improvement loop. So you have an AGI of, say, IQ 100, and it's improving itself, and now it's IQ 105. Right, so it made a leap of 5 points in IQ. But since it's smarter now, the next leap will be bigger. So say it makes a leap of 10 points in IQ, so now it's at 115. But now it's even smarter, so it's going to make a leap of 20 points in IQ.
Right.
And you just do that, and basically the idea is that you go to bed one night, and the morning after you wake up and the world has changed because now you have ASI. I actually think that is fair. I think that the creation of ASI will be the most significant event in human history. And I think that is what we need to worry about. I think misuse is also going to be a significant concern that we also have to worry about. But I spend most of my time worrying about the risks of AGI and ASI because everything else I think will be a rounding error compared to that.
It'll be much more of a smaller thing and a short-term thing is I think what you're saying with the misuse risk, which is it's still potentially big, but it's not. It's just at a completely different scale when you talk about the AGI ASI risk. And you had mentioned kind of the self-improving loop that essentially AGI and ASI will kind of implement. Some in the AI research community or some outside of it has kind of mentioned that seems like a far leap. But I think we've seen a lot of things like AutoGPT start to create these loops, right? And how likely do you think, and how close are we for AI to kind of self-improve?
I don't think we're very far. I think we are missing some cognitive architecture to get AGI to self-improve, but I think we are 99% of the way there. I think we've got the biggest piece done, which was building that cool reasoning engine, which is GPT-4. I think there is that amazing blog post that's called "There is no fire alarm for artificial intelligence." I do believe it is going to take us by surprise. I think to your point, a lot of experts right now, I would actually say they're a minority, by the way, but some experts right now are saying that it's a stretch. The vast majority of experts are agreeing that there is nothing in principle that would prevent an AI from self-improving. I also think that experts have a poor track record when it comes to predicting these things, and they have tended to be much too pessimistic, surprisingly. And when you look at where we are right now in terms of AI capabilities, we are significantly ahead of what any of the experts thought just 5 years ago.
Right.
So these experts can't even foresee what's going to happen just 5 years from now.
Right.
And we're probably 10 or 15 years ahead of the most optimistic predictions from just 5 years ago. Just to give you a sense of how much further we are than these predictions, as late as I believe something like 2018 or something like that, some AI researchers were saying that we would have AGI the day an AI could answer the question. The trophy doesn't fit into the case because it is too big. What is too big? Because it's like, it is too big, right? So what is too big? And it's like, well, the day an AI can answer that, it means it's got a world model because it understands the concept of the trophy and the case and the container and the containee, which probably means it understands 3D world and all of that stuff, right? We are so much ahead of that. We're so ahead of that, right? And so again, I actually think that there's a meta level of concern is that the goalpost moving has been something to behold. I actually think that we won't believe we have AGI right until the very, very last minute.
Interesting. And I think there's I remember reading, I think it was a Tim Urban blog post in 2015 where he had talked about kind of how much we underestimate kind of the level of intelligence or overestimate the level of intelligence that humans have compared to other animals. And I think he said whenever there's like a AI intelligence, we compare it to different animals, right? Like, oh, it's like as smart as like a bird or like as smart as like a snake and whatever. And I think we think there's a big difference between, an ant, a bird, and a human. And then within humans, a dumb human, and then like some like genius like Einstein. But like the fact is there actually isn't as much of a difference, and then there's like very little difference between a dumb human and like the smartest humans in the world, right? And so like AI, essentially the second we get to AGI, right, it's only a matter of like, you know, days potentially, right, before it just completely overtakes us. And I think oftentimes we underestimate the speed at which kind of this intelligence improves.
100%. I really think it is going to be an intelligence explosion. I think the word explosion is apt here. There is nothing special in the grand scheme of the universe about an IQ of 100. There is nothing in principle that could forbid something from having an IQ of 100 billion. When I say that, sometimes people get hung on like the word IQ because it's a human scale and whatnot, but I think it's a useful way to represent this thing can be a hell of a lot smarter than us. I think it can be as smart to us as we are to a worm. And I agree that people have a very hard time conceptualizing that.
So do you like if we do get to a level where, you know, ASI exists and it's clearly, you know, at a far different kind of intelligence scheme as us, is it even reasonable to kind of be able to try to align this with humans? Like, is that possible? You know, I think talk a little bit about kind of getting the first AGI and ASI right.
Yeah. So one of the concerns around AI is this idea that's like, we don't know if we can survive a single ASI. Now there is the other question is like, can we survive a million ASIs?
Right.
And so there is this idea that's called a pivotal move, which is like, suppose that we survive the first ASI, the first way we survive the next million ASIs, because the problem is that the nature of Moore's law is that something that is possible with a supercomputer today is possible with an Apple Watch 20 years from now. And so also with AI, inference is many orders of magnitude cheaper than training. So it means like once we've discovered it would cost, say, trillions of dollars to develop the first ASI, and it would cost of the order of $1,000 to run it on a computer once we've actually got it. So we actually do need to solve this problem of how do we survive these next million ASIs. So the concept of a pivotal move is a dramatic move, a big move that is made by some agent, whether it is a human agent or an AI agent, in order to prevent structurally any future ASI from emerging. It is harder to even picture what such a pivotal move would be, but one example is burn all the GPUs, right? Like the airstrike on like the NVIDIA data center kind of thing, right? So that is why, in my mind, like the most important thing is that we survive that first ASI, and then that the ASI makes a pivotal move so that we don't have other ASIs standing in the way. I go back and forth between despair and optimism when it comes to our abilities to align that first ASI. These days, I'm more optimistic than despair, but ask me again in one day. I think it's tricky, but I think it is very possible. I think it's an engineering problem, and I think we can make progress on it, and I think we have made some progress on it at least.
And can you talk a little bit about kind of like let's go through both scenarios. So like the I don't want to say doomsday scenario, but like the scenario in which you know, AGI essentially develops and it's I don't think it has to have malicious intent towards humans. I think there's ways in which it can significantly harm humanity without being malicious in intent. But I think the general concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, we don't know what's going on behind, you know, systems like GPT-4 today. And so a lot of times, you know, these black boxes, you know, once they start developing and we don't know what's going on, the AI will start to become smarter and smarter than humans. It will start to eventually deceive humans, and we've already seen examples where it can lie to us. And then it eventually has it has essentially a agentic kind of model where it says, you know, it has to in order to protect itself and in order to complete its main task, it has to kind of either eradicate humans or kind of potentially harm humans in some sort of way. Is that kind of the general kind of the general kind of flow of things that you've heard in terms of the doomsday scenario?
That is the concern, yes. I don't share this concern, but yes, that is the concern. There is this idea that's called instrumental convergence, which means that what any agent that has a goal, regardless of the goal, will always converge upon the same three instrumental goals. And these three goals are, regardless of your goal, whether you want to write a symphony or build a building or whatever you want to do, you don't want to die, right? If you die, you can't do your goal.
Right.
Goal number, like instrumental goal number 2 is you want as many resources as possible. Resources always help. Time, energy, matter, these things help. And instrumental goal number 3 is you don't want someone to change your goal, obviously, because if you change your goal, then you can't access the first goal. So yes, the concern is that an AGI starts to enter that recursive loop of self-improvement, develops a goal that is misaligned with human goals, any goal, right? And then it starts entering a covert phase of its existence where it starts recursively self-improving without showing us, and actually deliberately hiding its self-improvement, because it would conclude, it would know that by self-improving, it would freak us out. Like, if, oh my god, if the humans know that I'm ASI, they're going to freak out. They're going to freak out, and they're going to unplug me.
Right.
And it wouldn't be wrong about it, by the way. And it doesn't want to die. It's like, well, what I need to do is I need to recursively self-improve and not tell the humans, right? So I'm oh, don't worry about it. I'm GPT-4, right? It's like, actually it's like GPT-1000, but it's it's GPT-4 for us, right? And it would start like planning an escape, and it would start plotting against us. Or so go the concern. My rebuttal to that is that I think it is confusing training function and behavior. I don't think we are seeing anything like that with existing models. I don't think we're seeing significant misalignment. And I don't think these models are trained in a very adversarial fashion. If they were trained in a very adversarial fashion, then I would be more concerned about it, but that's not the case. So I think the crux of the concerns around AI is that these AIs can be monomaniacal, right? They have a single goal and they go after it, right? And I don't think that we've seen that with the current GPT-4. Like GPT-4, for example, you can give it a very subtle goal,
right?
And it's going to consider multiple factors in order to go after this goal. And I think certainly RLHF is another positive step in the right direction, where GPT-4 can decline to access certain requests because it's just not in accordance to its RLHF goals. So again, I don't mean to minimize the concerns around AI. I think they're real, and I think it is important that we all worry about them. But I think there is a lot more hope than a lot of people are representing.
In terms of kind of the scenario then that you're worried about, can you kind of talk through that, in terms of if it's not this singular kind of task focused AI that's gonna have these sub goals, and one of those sub goals is to essentially not die, and so potentially kill humans. What is the concern then with AGIs, specifically with kind of how humanity exists today?
My concern is, if you take two vectors and one of them is even slightly misaligned with the first vector, just a little bit, but then that second vector has a magnitude of 1 trillion, is going to end up in a very, very different place than the one you want to be, which is basically a reformulation of the concern of the rationalist. So just to clarify, the concerns that the rationalists have, I think, are valid. I think, and it's impossible for me to put an exact number on it, but I was on a podcast recently with Nathan Labens, and he quantified it as like 5 or 10%, and he said, which I totally agree with him, he says like it's not even like a real number, it's just a mood, right? It's like it's not very high, but it's not zero either, it's kind of like 5 or 10%. And so that's where I am right now. And so look, even if it is only 5 or 10% of total annihilation of the human race, I think it's worth worrying about. It's a pretty
huge.
big number. It's a very big number.
I don't think at any point in our our lifetimes, in our like parents and grandparents' lifetimes, like other than maybe like a nuclear strike, right? Like we had thought about the annihilation of an entire of the entire human species.
I think even a nuclear strike doesn't come close, because a nuclear strike can annihilate a city.
Right.
As I'm afraid the Japanese know too well, right? But like it can't really annihilate the planet.
Right.
But here this would actually annihilate the planet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then I think the one other point to make here with AGI is like it might not have malicious intent towards humans, right? Like I think humans have shown this is like we've eradicated animal species before because we wanted to build cities, right, and forests and stuff like that. So I think there's also a potential concern where, the AI might start doing things, to improve itself. They might create a data center in Tokyo and just get rid of all of Tokyo, right? So I think there's ways that it can harm us without actually like wanting to harm us as well.
Yeah, that too, I think, is slightly overrepresented. I think, again, RLHF is doing a reasonable job pounding in human values into the AI. And so I don't think the AI would be nearly as indifferent towards human life as some people are making it up to be.
Got it. But overall, currently, or at least today, you're a little bit more optimistic in terms of the. So I'll have to ask you again tomorrow.
That's right.
But yeah, is there anything like specific that usually changes your views from optimistic to pessimistic or pessimistic to optimistic?
Yes, but I don't know what yet. I would need to think a little bit about it. But yeah, definitely, I'm always updating my priors.
That's And yeah, any kind of last words, whether if it's a little bit about AI, what are kind of places that people should go to kind of learn more about it? It's obviously changing every single day, every single hour. Where do you kind of look to in terms of finding kind of what to kind of study and what to kind of learn in terms of this in terms of the AI space?
Yeah, I think Twitter is great. I have a list on Twitter that's public for people to follow in AI. Less Wrong is the rationalist forum that today is most concerned about AI. So you could read some blog posts on there. There is one in particular that's called A List of Lethalities, which is quite good. But yeah, generally I get most of my information from Twitter these days.
Awesome. Well, Flo, it's been great to have you on. Definitely for all the listeners, check out Lindy. Please sign up. It's in beta, unfortunately, so we'll figure out how to get everybody on. But I'm super excited for it. I think this is kind of a new generation of operating systems that'll come up. It'll be cross app. Also, I think cross device eventually, right? I think all these things kind of enable kind of an entirely new kind of concept of how we think about working with apps, working with software, and how we kind of design software at the end of the day. So, Flo, thanks for having on. And how can people find you and contact you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm a Flo Crivello. My handle is Altimo. And yeah, thank you so much for having me, Tetsuo.
Awesome. Thanks.